Dan married a woman who had an identical twin sister. Less than a year into the marriage, he found himself standing in court, filing for divorce. The judge asked him, "Please explain to the court why you are seeking a divorce." Dan sighed and replied, "Well, Your Honor, my sister-in-law visits us often, and since she and my wife look exactly alike, there were times I accidentally made love to her instead of my wife." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Surely there must be some way to tell them apart." Dan nodded emphatically. "Oh, there's a difference, Your Honor. That's exactly why I want the divorce." Jack knows his co-worker to be a normally conservative fellow and is curious about the sudden change in his fashion sense. Jack finally walks up to him and says, "I didn't know you were into earrings." "Don't make such a big deal. It's only an earring," he replies sheepishly. Jack falls silent for a few minutes, but then his curiosity prods him to ask, "So how long have you been wearing it?" "Ever since my wife found it in my truck." A little girl says, "Grandpa, can I sit on your lap?" "Of course you can," her grandfather replied. As she is sitting on Grandpa's lap, she says, "Grandpa, can you make a sound like a frog?" "A sound like a frog?" "Well, sure, Grandpa can make a sound like a frog." The girl says, "Okay, please make a sound like a frog." Perplexed, her granddad says, "Sweetheart, why do you want me to make a sound like a frog?" And the little girl says, "Because Grandma said that when you croak, we're going to go to Disneyland." A man goes to a female dentist to have a tooth pulled. He's visibly nervous, shifting in his chair, so the dentist tries to calm him down. "Don't worry," she says with a reassuring smile. "This will only hurt a little. You'll feel a pinch and then it'll all be over." The man chuckles nervously. "It's not the pain I'm worried about, Doc. It's the bill." The dentist laughs but carries on professionally. She administers the numbing agent and begins the procedure. Just as she's about to start, the man grabs her hand and says, "Be gentle, okay? I've never done this with a woman before." The dentist raises an eyebrow and smirks. "What do you mean, with a woman?" He stammers. "I mean a female dentist. I've only had guy dentists before, so this is new territory for me." With a sly grin, she quips, "Well, first time for everything. Relax. I'll make sure it's a memorable experience." The man laughs nervously. After the tooth is pulled and the procedure is done, the dentist hands him the bill. He looks at it, sighs, and mutters under his breath, "Yep, definitely memorable." A married couple is driving down the interstate doing 55 miles per hour, with the husband behind the wheel. His wife looks over at him and says, "Honey, I know we've been married for 15 years, but I want a divorce." The husband says nothing but slowly increases his speed to 60 miles per hour. She then says, "I don't want you to try to talk me out of it, because I've been having an affair with your best friend, and he's a better lover than you." Again, the husband stays quiet and just speeds up as his anger increases. She says, "I want the house." Again, the husband speeds up and is now doing 70 miles per hour. She says, "I want the kids too." The husband just keeps driving faster and faster. Now he's up to 80 miles per hour. Rush! She says, "I want the car, the checking account, and all the credit cards too." The husband slowly starts to veer toward a bridge overpass piling as she says, "Is there anything you want?" The husband says, "No, I've got everything I need." She asks, "Really? What's that?" As he veers the car off the road at 90 miles per hour, he replies, "The airbag." Bob is getting older, and his kids decided to put him in an assisted living facility. Bob at first was reluctant to go there. Bob's wife had died several years earlier, but when his children showed him around the place, he found out that there were 10 women for every man living there. Since Bob had married young in life and didn't really get a chance to sow his wild oats when younger, he decided to give the place a go and see if he could catch up on some fun times with the ladies there. On his first day at the home, he met Sally, a pleasant older woman who informed Bob that on Wednesday nights it was movie night for the residents. She asked Bob if he would go with her to the movie that week. Bob told Sally that he would go with her, but only if she held his buddy during the film. Sally thought about this for a bit and decided, what the heck, she could do that, as she really wanted a date for Wednesday movie night. Everything went well with the date, and the next Tuesday, Sally asked Bob if he would take her to the movie again this week. But Bob said he was sorry he could not, because he was going to the Wednesday night movie with another resident, Jane. Sally was a bit miffed that Bob already had found someone else, and asked Bob, "So what's Jane got that I haven't got?" To which Bob replied, "Parkinson's." I was sitting in the waiting room for my first appointment with a new dentist in town. I noticed his DDS diploma hanging on the wall, which bore his full name. Suddenly, I remembered a tall, handsome, dark-haired boy with the same name had been in my high school class some 30-odd years ago. Could he be the same guy that I had a secret crush on way back then? Upon seeing him, I quickly discarded any such thought. This balding, grey-haired man with a deeply lined face was way too old to have been my classmate. After he examined my teeth, I couldn't resist, so I asked him if he had attended Morgan High School. Yes, I did," he gleamed with pride. "When did you graduate?" I asked. He answered, "In 1975. Why do you ask?" "You were in my class," I exclaimed. He looked at me closely. Then that ugly, old, bald, wrinkled, fat, grey-haired, rude, decrepit idiot asked, "Oh, what did you teach?" Billy Bob wanted a job as a signalman on the railways. He was told to meet the inspector at the signal box. The inspector asked, "What would you do if you realized that 2 trains were heading for each other on the same track?" Billy Bob replied, "I would switch the points for one of the trains." "What if the lever broke?" asked the inspector. "Then I'd dash down out of the signal box," said Billy Bob, "and I'd use the manual lever over there. What if that had been struck by lightning? Then," Billy Bob continued, "I'd run back into the signal box and phone the next signal box. What if the phone was busy? Well, in that case," persevered Billy Bob, "I'd rush down out of the box and use the public emergency phone at the level crossing up there. What if that was vandalized? Oh, well then, I'd run into town and go get my Uncle Lester." This puzzled the inspector, so he asked, "Why would you do that?" Billy Bob answered, "Well, Uncle Lester ain't never seen a train wreck." A husband and wife are at a store, shopping for new glasses for the kitchen. The wife picks up a set of small glasses and says, "I think these smaller ones are perfect." The husband shakes his head. "No way, let's get the larger ones. They're just easier to use." The wife insists, "But smaller glasses are trendy right now. We should stick with these." Before the debate could heat up, the store clerk jumps in, trying to help. "Sir, your wife is absolutely right. Small glasses are what everyone's buying these days. Bigger ones are so outdated." The husband glares at the clerk and says, "Listen, buddy, if you don't know the whole situation, stay out of it. My hands don't fit into those tiny glasses. How am I supposed to wash them? An elderly-looking gentleman, mid-90s, very well dressed, with hair well-groomed, great-looking suit, flower in his lapel, smelling slightly of a good aftershave, presenting a well-looked-after image, walks into an upscale cocktail lounge. Seated at the bar is an elderly-looking lady. The gentleman walks over, sits alongside her, orders a drink, takes a sip, turns to her, and says, "So tell me, do I come here often?" It was Christmas Eve, and Bill had yet to buy a Christmas gift for his wife. He walked into a nice department store, approached a counter, and asked for ideas. "How about some perfume?" the saleslady asked. She showed him a bottle costing $150. "That's too expensive," muttered Bill. The young lady returned with a smaller bottle for $80. "Still too much," he replied. Growing rather annoyed at Bill's lack of generosity, the saleslady brought out a small $25 bottle and handed it to him. Bill became agitated and said, "What I mean is, I'd like to see something really cheap." So the saleslady handed him a mirror. My wife and I were sitting at a table at my 20-year high school reunion, and I kept staring at a drunken lady swigging her drink as she sat alone at a nearby table. My wife asks, "Do you know her?" "Yes," I sighed. "She's my old girlfriend. I understand she took to drinking right after we split up those many years ago, and I hear she hasn't been sober since." "My gosh," says my wife, "who would think a person could go on celebrating that long?" Johnny and his girlfriend are sitting together. Johnny, with a mischievous smile, says, "All right, put it inside." She looks a bit uncertain and replies, "I don't think I can do this." He chuckles. "Use both hands to hold it and give it a good squeeze." She tries it and says, "Wow, this method works so well." Just then, their teacher, Mrs. Thompson, walks by, noticing what they're doing. She looks at them, clearly confused, and yells, "What exactly are you two doing?" Johnny smiles and says, "It's just a mango, Mrs. Thompson, the traditional way of eating it." Little Johnny walks a cow through the village square. The mayor sees him and asks, "Hey Johnny, where are you going with the cow?" "I'm taking her to the bulls so she would get pregnant," answers Johnny. The mayor is shocked. Surely your father had better be doing that. Little Johnny thinks about it for a bit and shakes his head. "Nah, I think it's really best left with the bulls." The Sunday school teacher is a little concerned that his kids might be a little confused about Jesus, so he asks his class, "Where is Jesus today?" Susie replies, "He's in heaven." Mary replies, "He's in my heart." Little Johnny says, "He's in the bathroom." The teacher says, "How do you know this?" Then little Johnny says, "Well, every morning my father gets up, bangs on the bathroom door, and yells, 'Jesus Christ, are you still in there?'" Little Johnny comes home and tells his daddy, "Dad, tomorrow there's a special adults evening at school." Daddy is surprised. "Really? Special?" "Yes," nods Johnny. "It will be just you, the teacher, the headmaster, and 2 police officers." Little Johnny was with his mom as she was driving her old beat-up car on the highway. She tried to keep up with traffic, but they were flying by her. After getting caught in a large group of cars flying down the road, she looked at her speedometer to see she is doing 15 miles over the speed limit. Slowing down, she moved over to the side to let the group of cars get ahead. She looked up and saw the flashing lights of a police car. Pulling over, she waited for the officer to come up to her car. As he did, he said, "Ma'am, do you know why I pulled you over?" Little Johnny piped up from the back seat. "I do. It's because you couldn't catch the other cars." 3 men are captured and are going to be killed. The only way they can live is if they pass a trial. They must go into the jungle and find 10 pieces of fruit. The first man comes back quickly with 10 apples. The leader of the men who captured them then says, "Now you must shove them up your ass without facial expression." The man puts the first apple up there with no problem. But on the second apple, he winces and is killed. The next man comes back with some small berries. They tell him the same thing. Suddenly, while he is putting the 10th berry up there, he bursts into laughter. The first man and the second man meet in heaven. The first man asks, "You were so close, why did you laugh?" He replies, "I saw the last guy returning with pineapples." A lawyer by the name of Strange died. His family asked the tombstone inscriber to write, "Here lies Strange, an honest man and a lawyer," on the headstone. The inscriber suggested this would confuse the passerby, who would think 3 people were buried there. He suggested, "Here lies a man who was both honest and a lawyer." When anyone walks by, he explained, they'll be certain to remark, "That's strange." An Arab man is wandering lost through the Sahara. He sees a man in the distance and struggles to get there, hoping it's not a mirage. He finally arrives and sees a nice man with a table of ties. "Please, I've been lost for hours, and so incredibly thirsty. Do you have any water?" The guy looks at him and says, "No, why don't you buy a tie?" Arab man looks at him and says, "I don't want a tie, I just need some water." "Your shirt is all dirty. I think you'd look good in a new tie." "For f***'s sake, I don't want a tie. Please just give me some water," says the Arab. "Well, I don't have any water, but there's a restaurant about 5 miles east that has plenty," says the Jew. A few hours later, the man is packing up his things to go home for the day and sees the Arab man again crawling back on his arms and knees. He approaches him and asks, "Hey, were you able to find that restaurant?" "Yeah, but your brother wouldn't let me in without a tie." A stingy old lawyer who had been diagnosed with a terminal illness was determined to prove wrong. The old saying, "You can't take it with you." After much thought and consideration, the old ambulance chaser finally figured out how to take at least some of his money with him when he died. He instructed his wife to go to the bank and withdraw enough money to fill 2 pillowcases. He then directed her to take the bags of money to the attic and leave them directly above his bed. His plan: when he passed away, he would reach out and grab the bags on his way to heaven. Several weeks after the funeral, the deceased lawyer's wife, up in the attic cleaning, came upon the 2 forgotten pillowcases stuffed with cash. "Oh, that old fool," she exclaimed. "I knew he should have had me put the money in the basement." 2 Texas farmers, Jim and Bob, are sitting in a bar, enjoying beers. Jim turns to Bob and says, "You know what? I'm going to go to college." He then leaves the bar and makes his way over to the local college. He is met with the Dean of Administration, who is explaining to Jim what classes he is going to take. "All right, Jim, you are going to take 4 classes," the Dean says. English, math, science, and logic. Logic? Jim asked. What the hell is that? Here, I'll give you an example. Do you own a weed whacker? Proudly, Jim responded. Yes, I do. Well, if you own a weed whacker, then logically speaking, you own a lawn, the dean said. Yes, I do have a lawn. Well, if you have a lawn, then logically speaking, you own a house. Yes, I do have a house. And if you have a house, then logically speaking, you have a family. Yes, I do have a family. And if you have a family, then logically speaking, you have a wife. And if you have a wife, then logically speaking, you're heterosexual. Yes, I do have a wife and I am heterosexual. Wow, I can't believe you found out all of that just because you knew I had a weed whacker, Jim exclaimed. Yeah, that's what logic is, the dean responded. Jim excitedly went back to the bar, awaited by Bob. Bob, I'm taking 4 classes in college. English, math, science, and logic, Jim told Bob. Logic? Bob asks. What the hell is that? Here, I'll give you an example. Do you own a weed whacker? No. Then you're Robert, 85, married Jenny, a lovely 25-year-old. Since her new husband is so old, Jenny decides that after their wedding, she and Robert should have separate bedrooms, because she is concerned that her new but aged husband may overexert himself if they spend the entire night together. After the wedding festivities, Jen prepares herself for bed and the expected knock on the door. Sure enough, the knock comes. The door opens and there is Robert, her 85-year-old groom, ready for action. They unite as one. All goes well. Robert takes leave of his bride, and she prepares to go to sleep. After a few minutes, Jenny hears another knock on her door, and it's Robert. Again, he is ready for more action. Somewhat surprised, Jenny consents to more coupling boire. When the newlyweds are done, Robert kisses his bride, bids her a fond goodnight, and leaves. Jenny is set to go to sleep again. But you guessed it, Robert is back again, rapping on the door, and is as fresh as a 25-year-old, ready for more action. Once more, they enjoy each other. But as Robert gets set to leave again, his young bride says to him, I am thoroughly impressed that at your age you can perform so well and so often. I have been with guys less than a third of your age who were only good once. You are truly a great lover, Robert. Robert, somewhat embarrassed, turns to Jenny and says, You mean I was here already? Bob and a few of his co-workers go out to lunch to celebrate Bob's birthday. Bob, Tim, and Susan are sitting together in the booth when the waitress approaches. She hands them their menus and says, Good afternoon, fellas. Welcome to Ruby Taste Kitchen. Before we get started, might I ask if you're here to celebrate a special occasion? Susan pipes up, It's Bob's birthday. Oh, well, happy birthday. Make sure you save room because you'll get a free dessert. Tim and Susan smile and nod, but Bob looks a bit confused. He asks her to repeat herself. Sure thing, happy birthday. Save room and you'll get a free dessert. There's a moment of silence before Bob says, Vroom, vroom. I've lived a long life, but as I sit here in the twilight of my years, I'm struck by the strangest realization. I still have so many unanswered questions. Who let the dogs out? Seriously, who? I've had decades to ponder this, and I'm no closer to an answer. Where's the beef? I looked in the fridge, the freezer, and even that back corner of the pantry where forgotten snacks go to die. No beef. How do you get to Sesame Street? I've asked Siri, Alexa, and even that old GPS with a glitchy voice that always says recalculating. Still no luck. Why doesn't Dora just use Google Maps? If I can figure it out at my age, surely she can. Why are eggs cradled in flimsy paper, yet batteries are locked behind Fort Knox-level plastic? Did someone mix up their priorities? Why can't women apply mascara with their mouths closed? Is it a design flaw in humanity, or mascara? And who decided abbreviated should be such a long word? It's almost ironic, isn't it? Why does lemon juice have artificial flavoring, but dish soap gets the real deal? Should we be cooking with dish soap instead? Why sterilize the needle for a lethal injection? I mean, what's the harm at that point? And this one bugs me to no end. Why does it cost 2 cents to share a thought, but you only get a penny for yours? Where's that missing penny? Is it going to fund some secret penny vault? Why do The Alphabet Song and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star share the same tune? Were the composers just lazy, or was it a conspiracy to mess with our heads? Why did you just try to sing them both to check? Don't worry, I did it too. And Victoria's Secret? After all this time, I still don't know what she's hiding. Is it the missing beef? You're probably thinking I'm clever, but I must confess, I didn't come up with all this on my own. I borrowed it from a friend, who got it from her brother's girlfriend's uncle's cousin's baby's godfather's barber. It's been passed down like an ancient scroll of unanswerable wisdom. So here I am, with a lifetime of pondering and no closer to the truth. Maybe the real secret of life isn't in finding the answers, but in reveling in the question. A man was watching his wife prepare dinner one evening when he noticed something peculiar. As she got ready to fry sausages, she cut off both ends, tossed them away, and placed only the middle portion into the pan. Curious, he asked, "Why do you always cut off the ends of the sausages before frying them?" She shrugged and said, "I don't know. That's how my mom always did it." Intrigued, they decided to visit her mother the next day. The wife asked, "Mom, why did you teach me to cut off the ends of the sausage before frying them?" The mother thought for a moment and replied, "I'm not sure. That's just how my asterisk mom always did it. Maybe we should ask her." Determined to solve the mystery, they went to visit the grandmother. The wife asked, "Grandma, why do we always cut off the ends of the sausage before frying them?" The grandmother chuckled and said, "You know, I never really questioned it. That's how my mother did it. Let's ask her." Finally, the 3 generations gathered to visit the great-grandmother at her retirement home. After explaining the question that had stumped them all, the great-granddaughter asked, "Great-grandma, why did you teach us to cut off the ends of the sausage before frying them?" The elderly woman raised an eyebrow in surprise and laughed. "You're all still doing that? I only did it because my pan was too small to fit the whole sausage." Sid, the elderly inventor, is struggling through Birmingham New Street railway station with 2 huge and obviously heavy suitcases when a stranger walks up to him and asks, "Have you got the time?" Sid sighs, put down the suitcases and glances at his wrist. "It's 4:45, he says. "Hey, that's a pretty fancy watch," exclaims the stranger. Sid brightens a little. "Yeah, it's not bad. I've been working on it for a while. Have a look at this." And he shows him a time zone display, not just for every time zone in the world, but for the 200 largest cities. He hits a few buttons, and from somewhere on the watch, a voice says, "The time is 10:47 a.m. in a New York accent." A few more buttons, and the same voice says something in Japanese. Sid continues, "I've put in regional accents for each city." The display is unbelievably high quality, and the voice is simply astounding. The stranger is struck dumb with admiration. That's not all. says Sid. He pushes a few more buttons and a tiny but a very high-resolution map of central Birmingham appears on the display. The flashing dot shows our location by GPS, explains Sid. View recede 10. He adds, and the display changes to show the entire West Midlands. I want to buy this watch, gasps the stranger. Oh no, it's not ready for sale yet. I'm still working out the bugs, says Sid. But look at this. And he proceeds to demonstrate that the watch is also a very creditable little digital radio receiver, a sonar device that can measure distances up to 125 meters, a pager with the thermal paper printout, and, most impressive of all, an audio player capable of storing voice recordings of up to 300 standard-size books. Though I've only got 32 of my favourites in there so far, says Sid. I've got to have this watch, insists the stranger. No, you don't understand. It's not ready. I'll give you £1,000 for it. Oh no, I've already spent more than wuss. I'll give you £3,000 for it. But it's just not. I'll give you £5,000 for it. And the stranger pulls out a large wad of £50 notes. Sid stops to think. He's only put about £530 into materials and development, and with £5,000 he can make another one and have it ready for marketing in only 6 months. The stranger frantically finishes counting out the money and waves it in front of him. Here it is, ready to hand to you right here and now. £5,000. Take it or leave it. Sid abruptly makes his decision. Okay, he says, and peels off the watch. They make the exchange and the stranger starts happily away. Hey, wait a minute, calls Sid after the stranger, who turns around warily. Sid points to the 2 suitcases he'd been trying to drag through the station. Don't forget your batteries,